audience. Okay.
Lo ves en YouTube, okay.
So does anyone know where Cape Verde is? After having researched for hours and initially not knowing what Cape Verde was, I feel I'm very prepared to tell you where Cape Verde is, and I hope that by the end of this speech you will be able to tell me where Cape Verde is and know a little bit more about its history and about what Cape Verde is about. So first I'll tell you about its geographic details and its economic details. Then I'll tell you about its history and culture, and finally I'll tell you some of its society's interpersonal relationships. So first let me tell you about its geographic location. It's 10 small islands off Africa's west coast. The area of Cape Verde is about the same as the DFW Metroplex area. So if you've traveled from Dallas to Fort Worth, you've about traveled all 10 islands. The capital of Cape Verde is Praia on Santiago. Its main language is Portuguese, and the people who live there are a mix between African and Portuguese. The president there currently is Jorge Carlos Fonseca. And the government there is similar to the US government, being that it has the 3 branches: the executive, legislative, and judicial. Its economy is very small. It actually doesn't have enough resources to sustain the population. But according to the CIA website, a majority of its food, about 82%, is imported from countries around it. The majority of its exports are fuel and shoes, which all go to Portugal. And the huge amount of money that it makes, it comes from tourism. It's considered a crossroads because of this, because it facilitates travel from Africa to all the countries who are bordered the Atlantic. All of its economy is pretty much tied to Portugal, actually, being that it's so dependent on it. Now that I've finished telling you about the geographic and economic details, let me go on to its history. Having been founded in the 15th century, it was initially found by Portuguese explorers, and it was uninhabited. It was settled to facilitate slave trade because the African coast was so close. During a period in the late 16th century, whenever the Jews were hated in Portugal, most of them were exiled to Cape Verde. And all the trade that was going on around Cape Verde caused them to be very attractive to pirates. All this negative attention actually attracted different types of people, mostly missionaries, to come and try to educate the people there to know what was right and what was wrong. And this ended up causing the Cape Verde to be one of the most educated colonies that Portugal had. Eventually this led to liberal ideas in the inhabitants, and in 1972 they finally joined up with Guinea-Bissau, which was one of the nearest Portugal colonies, and debated for their freedom. Having little natural resources once they were free, they needed someone to support them, and having just had that really nice agreement with Portugal, they became very dependent upon Portugal and based most of their economy on Portugal. After the long Portuguese rule and the proximity to the African people, most of their cultural ties are back to African and European. The religion currently is Roman Catholic, and that is mostly because of the Portuguese descendants. And their country's music and dance is called morna, which is a mix between string and wind instruments. After having just told you the culture, let me tell you a little bit about the gestures that they use. Whenever you speak to someone who is a Cape Verdean, they're typically going to be touching you a lot. Friends typically hold hands whenever they're in public to show their affection. Usually whenever you're talking to someone who you respect, you look down and away from their eyes to show that you respect their authority. And it's common, even if you do not know the person, to be constantly touching their shoulders and their face to show that you're paying attention. Something peculiar that I found about their intimate relationships is that, firstly, both genders get to choose their spouses, but in the end, the people who finally decide whether or not they can get married to those people are the family. And women, once they are married to a husband, must remain faithful their entire lives, but men are asked to be promiscuous and have children with other women. Now that I've told you a little bit more about their culture, let me sum up my speech and end it. First, I told you about the geographic location and the economy of Cape Verde. Then I told you about the history and the culture of Cape Verde. Finally, I told you about their gestures and their intimate relationships. After having researched Cape Verde for so long, I'm extremely intrigued in this small country, and I hope to visit it one day. Thank you.
here's my audience once again.
Obrigado.